Hi guys, now we are joined with Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. He needs no introduction. Um, if I say in Hindi, he is Bhishma Pitama of Indian diplomacy today. He has such a long and lengthy and he's such a seasoned diplomat. It's a pure honor to be with him. And welcome, sir, to the debate. Sir, my first question to you would be, in the recent time, we are looking at a new kind of diplomacy emerging in South Asia. The foreign relations are changing, the dynamics are changing, the interests are converging with countries which never used to look at each other eye to eye. Recently, we have seen Russia selling Mi-35 attack helicopters to Pakistan, and Russia getting involved in talks with Afghan Taliban, and Pakistan facilitating it. Recently, the Pakistani Foreign Minister Khwaja Asif was in Russia for quite a long time, and while the FATF meeting was going on. So, sir, how do you see these developments with regards to the Indian interest in the region?
Well, a lot of the established structures of the post-Cold War world have begun to change. And as a result of that, countries now have to think about how they're going to handle the so-called new opportunities and challenges. Now, what has happened is that India is now persuaded that if it wants really to implement many of the programs that Prime Minister Modi has launched, which are all in the nature of modernizing Indian society and using digital technology for that, and best practices and higher standards in manufacturing and everything else, and investment. Now, where is it going to come from? Primarily, it's going to come from the United States and Europe, let's say the Western world. So, driven by pure pragmatic needs of what we want to achieve in terms of the knowledge economy and how it can propel India into a more modern economy, we have to turn towards the West. It has nothing to do with our relations with Russia, or for that matter, China, but I'll come back to later. Now, the perception has grown that we are now moving into the American camp or into the Western camp. At the same time, the relations between the United States and Russia have deteriorated so badly that Russia has done a couple of things. One, that it has strengthened its relations with China in order to counter the pressures from NATO and United States and Europe. And at the same time, they have begun to feel very concerned that the United States, backed by some European countries, UK especially, will want to embroil Russia once again into, I won't say embroil, will use Islamism, Islamic extremism and terrorism to attack Russia through Afghanistan, because the Islamic State has been decimated in Iraq and in Syria, and they fear that they will now enter Afghanistan because Afghanistan is lawless territory, and the Taliban is increasing its strength. So they are suspicious. So the result of all these developments is this, that when it comes to Pakistan, and given the very close ties that China has with Pakistan and the close ties Russia has with China, Russia is now more inclined to align itself a little more with Chinese interests in the region rather than fully being aligned with our interests, which explains their reach out to Pakistan, which explains in part their sale of military helicopters to Pakistan, which explains their reaching out to the Taliban, etc., etc. Now, the point we have to see is how much importance should we give to this. Now, if we have tolerated the United States playing games with both India and Pakistan for so long, and continue to do that even now.
Yeah.
They're not at all clear about what they want to do with Pakistan. So why do we assume that Russia should remain loyal and steadfast? That we can have all our options open, but we're not going to like the idea that Russia should adjust its options a little bit in the light of their own interests. So therefore, I think we should not miss the wood for the trees. And while we will be in, we would certainly, we should raise these issues with Russia because they cause misapprehensions. And we should not, on both sides, do anything which reduces the level of trust that has been built between the two countries for so long. So we should continue to reason and have a dialogue with the Russians on this, but not get into a thinking mode that Russia has changed sides or Russia is now aligned with Pakistan or China. No, I think Russia is now pragmatically pursuing its interests in terms of its own needs, just as we are pursuing our interests in the light of our own needs.
So the second question to you is that recently we have seen that China never hesitates doing skirmishes and the war practices and joint exercises with the armed forces of Pakistan in the disputed territories of J&K, and they often do practices in joint exercises in Gilgit-Baltistan region. So what shies India away from joining such exercises with the Southeast Asian nations in the disputed territories which are being considered disputed by China? For example, South China Sea and the other regions, the countries which are troubled by the Chinese hegemonic attitude. Shouldn't India join their hands to send a signal to China that we are also there in the game?
Well, that is happening, no? First of all, we are doing now exercises with the United States, both land, sea and air. And the land exercises are held in the mountains. And the sea exercise, the Malabar exercises, now Japan has joined them. And it's quite clear why Japan has been made a permanent part of the Malabar exercise. So it's not as if we are also not engaged in exercises which the Chinese understand have the intention of countering China in the Indian Ocean. But more than that, if you know, these exercises have been held off the Sea of Okinawa, which is in the area where China is. So that also is a clear message. We do exercises with Vietnam. We've done exercises with the Russians in the northern part of the Western Pacific. I don't know if it's in the Sea of Okhotsk, but it is in that area. So we've done. In fact, Admiral Dhawan brought his ships for exercise with the Russian Navy off Vladivostok when I was ambassador to Russia, and I went all the way to Vladivostok to visit our ships and generally not oversee the exercises, but I'm aware of the nature of the exercise and this and that. So we are also doing that. But what you are saying is something. What you are asking is something different. Whether we should actually participate in the freedom of navigation patrols. Right. And the freedom of navigation patrols. First of all, in terms of our access through the South China Sea and East China Sea to Russia or whatever else, we are doing that. And we are, in that sense, exercising our freedom of navigation. But insofar as exercising these freedom of navigation patrols through the territorial waters of the new islands and rocks and reefs that China has reclaimed, that is a very different thing. Now, if the Chinese and the Pakistanis were to do exercises, let's say in Maldives or in Sri Lanka, then that will give us the freedom to do what you're saying. But in terms of what you said about the POK and this and that, in fact, we lost the battle in 1963 when they built that Karakoram Road. So they built that Karakoram Road. We didn't do anything about it. Even with regard to the CPEC, we were late in reacting. It's not as if we reacted immediately. I wrote several articles to say that what the implications was and this and that, and slowly public opinion got built up, not because of what I was writing, but I think awareness grew, and we decided to take a position. But China has been present in this area for a long time. They started upgrading the Karakoram highway. We didn't do anything. Foreign companies, Japanese companies have been doing projects in POK. Yeah. It's only now, after Abe and this and that, that we have reasoned with the Japanese and they have withdrawn. Yeah. But there are European companies that are operating in POK. So it's not as straightforward as you say, and in terms of establishing a quid pro quo, it's not that simple.
Recently I was reading a book by Michael Pillsbury, The 100-Year Marathon. It pretty much explains how Chinese policies work and how they perceive things. So, sir, when I look at the Indian policy vis-a-vis China, it's mostly a knee-jerk reaction. Like, if China reaches out to Djibouti, then we start searching for bases in the Straits of Hormuz. If China reaches out to Gwadar, then we reach out to Oman or Chabahar. So, do you think that India needs to be a little proactive in making these, reaching out to these nations in Africa and Europe and the Middle East to get the strategic interests saved, so that China, the Indian conflict with the China in the world, in the freedom of navigation and other parts, that doesn't get hampered? Do you see that we need to be more proactive in our diplomacy?
Well, we have, for example, before the Chinese upgraded their interest and their presence in Maldives, we have a joint agreement with them to monitor their extended economic zone. Yeah. So we've been present there. Our military ships are there. This and that. We have also reached out to many Indian Ocean countries, whether it's Seychelles or Mauritius, of course, is a special country insofar as our relations are concerned. So we have, but more than that, if you look at the Malabar exercises, they started in 1996. So at that time, China was not present in the Indian Ocean. The string of pearls had not yet surfaced. The BRI had not been conceived. Yeah. And then we involved Japan also. There was some resistance on our part because, and that answers partly your earlier question about freedom of navigation operations. We don't want to be seen to be in an alliance relationship with the United States. We want to maintain our strategic autonomy and an independence of decision making. Because if we started giving the impression that we were becoming more and more allied militarily, it has certain consequences for India's stature, standing, its whole history of non-alignment, and the implications of that in terms of domestic public opinion, etc., etc. But the final thing why China is more proactive than we are is simply that China has a huge vulnerability in the Indian Ocean. And they have to address that vulnerability. They realize the Indian strength in the Indian Ocean. And therefore they have to find ways and means to counter this overwhelming Indian domination by increasing their presence in the Indian Ocean. So their motivations, which are strategic, political, military, economic, are far more powerful than whatever our motivations may be in terms of establishing our presence in the Indian Ocean, because we are very well placed. Now, we talked a lot this morning at this event about China's naval threat. But let's look at it a little more coolly and pragmatically. China cannot pose any serious threat, naval threat, to Indian interests in the Indian Ocean unless they have air cover. Otherwise, whatever they send is so totally exposed, it can be taken out in no time, whether it's their aircraft carrier or even the submarines. We are monitoring the submarines. The moment they enter the Indian Ocean, they are being monitored by our P-8 aircraft, which are armed, and they can if push comes to shove and if a conflict situation occurred, they can be easily dealt with. All right, they build this port in Hambantota or in Colombo port, or even tomorrow they get something in Maldives, and they have a couple of ships there. And within 10 minutes they can be destroyed. What will they do? So what they need are bases. Bases from where they can protect their sea-based assets. Now, where will they have their bases? No country is going to give them a base. Country can give them normal visiting rights. Ships come and they dock, they take fuel and food and whatever else, and they move on. This is perfectly normal. But a base means that you have to set up actually repair facilities. You have to store ammunition, spare parts. You have to create very extensive maintenance facilities, especially for submarines, or for that matter even ships, but especially for submarines, because they require a lot of maintenance. Now, no country is going to give them a military base, because the moment they give a military base, they become vulnerable. Because in the case of a conflict, they become belligerent countries, and then under international law, you can destroy those bases. The only country which can give them a base is Pakistan. So therefore, Gwadar will be an issue. But for that, the hinterland of Gwadar will have to be extensively developed. A huge industrial infrastructure will have to be built, because the parts that are required and spare parts that are required and this and that, facilities for those have to be built. So it's going to take a long time. For the next 10-15 years, I don't think we have to worry too much about China's naval threat rising to a level where our security is threatened. But China will incrementally try and do whatever they can. Now you take, let's say, this the corridors they have created. Yeah. All right, they want to deal with the Malacca dilemma, yeah, or whatever else. But when their ships are moving through the Arabian Sea to go to Gwadar from the Middle East, and mind you, they are all flying under Chinese flags, yeah, because as was brought out by Admiral Prakash, and that is true, or somebody else, it is true that unlike other countries which use vessels flying other flags, here these are Chinese flags. So in any conflict situation, they can just be taken up. They won't even reach Gwadar or anywhere else. So China has a huge problem in the Indian Ocean, and they have vulnerability. They are trying to combat that, but we have means to counter it. So I don't think we need to watch it closely, yeah, especially if their nuclear submarines start coming in large numbers, because they are a little more difficult to detect because they don't have to surface as much as the conventional submarines. But let us look at things proportionately.
Yes, carrying that forward, I recently read an article that China is coming up with a deep sea naval base in Jiwani in the southwestern Pakistan, and they are also building a low frequency station there to facilitate their nuclear submarines. Anyways, setting that aside, so my final question to you is, how do we see that, that in the recent time the Pashtun uprising has been there in Pakistan, which has been, I guess, not at all reported in Indian media. I don't know why. And this Pashtun uprising started from Fatah, then it went to Quetta. From there, now they are in Islamabad, and they are taking out rallies in huge numbers, and they're shouting slogans which were never heard before. So, and we all know what Pakistan Army has, and the Pakistani society as a whole has been doing with the Pashtuns for past 15 to 20 years. And even if we look at the Mahajar issue, how the political workers of MQM are being killed relentlessly on a daily basis for past 5 years, and for the Sindhi nationalists, the most of them are either dead or have escaped Pakistan. But do you think that India needs to raise these issues at a humanitarian basis more at UNHRC and other platforms, global platforms, where all these, the brutalities of Pakistan Army can be exposed? Because I or most of us don't see that happening a lot.
Assuming that a couple of submarines go there, then what happens? Nothing. They will go there and then they'll have to leave. Unless there is a huge development of the hinterland, yeah, where where they can be serviced. And those service facilities have to be set up. It is possible, but it will take a long time because everything will have to come through the corridor and this and that. And it become a huge establishment, huge amounts of money will have to be spent. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But just the fact that they dock there is all right for sure, but it doesn't really create a security threat in the real sense. But coming back to this other question about the Pashtuns and Sindhis and MQM and everything else. Yes, we could make an effort to highlight the human rights violations and other things of these people by the Pakistani state. We don't take the initiative to do that. When Pakistan attacks us on human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir, and then we answer back. But independently, we don't raise these issues, I think for two reasons. One is that all said and done, Pakistan is protected by the Arab countries, by even the United States, some Western countries, as well as China. So you can satisfy yourself that you have raised these issues, but it's not as if any pressure is going to be generated by those who are in the capacity, who have the capacity to raise, to put pressure to get Pakistan or to embarrass Pakistan. Whereas when it comes to Kashmir and human rights violation, Pakistan has a sympathetic audience, even if their credibility has been reduced. Again, the Muslim countries naturally react with sympathy because Muslims are involved. And the US and Britain, they have long interfered in the Kashmir question. Yeah. And they have always taken their side, frankly. Yeah. And even now when the situation has changed, on Kashmir per se, it's not as the Americans speak out in our favor. On terrorism, yes, but not Kashmir per se. Yeah. That applies to Britain. And China is there to protect Pakistan. So I suppose if you do a cost-benefit analysis, then you might find that, look, you can raise these issues, but Pakistan again will retaliate. And you will be giving them one more reason to hit back because they will answer. And whereas when they raise it, you answer them, but their raising it, of course, is a bit problematic for us because they get some sympathy. The OIC is always with them and they issue such kind of horrible statements on the human rights issues. So I think in terms of the amount of time we want to spend, what we can do, and I hope we are doing it and we should do more of it, is to unleash the Baluchis and Sindhis and this and that at these meetings and do a lot of propaganda around these meetings in terms of sending out literature and constantly bringing to their attention the sufferings that they are having at the hands, because Pakistan credibility has gone down. So to exploit that sufferings they are having at the hands of the Pakistani armed forces and everything else, and facilitate them, give them money, etc., etc., that we should do, and I hope we are doing it.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Okay.
Thanks.